So hello everybody and welcome to our special webinar on blogging. And before we start, I'm going just to remind you how you can raise your hand if you want to ask questions. At the bottom right corner of your screen, you should have a little icon with a hand in it. If you click on that, I will know you want to ask a question. Or the alternative, you can send me a chat and I can then unmute you or read your question, whichever you prefer. So before we start, I'm going to do a quick introduction of our guest today, and I'm really delighted to have her here today. It's Judy Sedgeman. And once I did the introduction, you'll see why she's the perfect person to lead this webinar on blogging. And I'm really grateful she accepted to share her wisdom on the subject of blogging. So to start, just a short introduction of Judy. Judy has been involved in the principle for 30 years, having first learned of this work when Bill Puckett was a client of hers in a medical practice management business. She worked for 9 years with Pransky and Associates in Laconia, and then she was recruited to bring the principle to West Virginia University School of Medicine. There she was a full-time on the faculty and ran an institute dedicated to the principle for 12 years until she moved to Florida in 2009. She is still an adjunct faculty member and teaches 2 online courses on the principle in the Graduate School of Public Health at West Virginia University. She also has offered a continuing education course on the principle online through the university for 15 years. And she mentioned that the course has been updated many times. She will now describe herself as a mental health educator, but she began her career as an English teacher before becoming a newspaper editor. She has a master's degree in linguistics and a doctoral degree in educational psychology. At West Virginia University, in addition to her principal courses, she also taught a writing course called Advanced Professional Writing for graduate students and medical students from whom English was a second language. It will be perfect for me. So, without further ado, I would like to pass the mic to Judy. Thank you, Judy.
Oh, well, thank you. What a nice introduction. I appreciate that. Well, hi. There's a lot of friends and people that I know on the list of attendees, and some people I don't know that well, but welcome, everybody. And I should tell you, this is an unusual role for me because, you know, for years before I got involved in business, I was an English teacher, and then I was a newspaper writer, and reporter, and editor. So, you know, this is my first field, is talking and teaching and writing. And the appreciation of good writing. And so it kind of gives me a chance to go back to my roots before the principle. And I have one little curiosity. I'm wondering, and I'm not quite sure how to take a poll here, but I was wondering if you could raise your hand. You don't have, we'll know that we're not trying to get questions. If you have written blogs or short essays or that kind of thing, generally speaking, and if you're comfortable writing, raise your hand. And if you're inexperienced as a writer, then I'll see how many people feel like they're experienced. Come on, Lori, you should be raising your hand. Yeah, come on. Okay, so we have a lot of people here who don't feel like they're experienced. That's interesting. Okay, thank you all. And, you know, so I guess I'm going to start from scratch. I'm assuming you all have word processing and you know how to use that, and that you are, and you know how to use features like the word count and spell check and all of that. So I'm going to take for granted that you have basic, and if I'm doing the wrong thing, then you're have to ask for additional instruction offline, but I'm taking for granted we all have access to a basic word processing program and that we can use basic word processing tools, and that we know to do spell check before we send things away, and that you can use the word count to keep yourself in check, so to speak. So because a blog is a special kind of writing in a way, and it's like a short essay, but it's very conversational, which is why you don't have to be an experienced writer to be a good blogger. because it's your personal voice. And, you know, I set up these little PowerPoints, not because I'm in love with PowerPoints, but sometimes it helps people to follow along and just to get an understanding. So in the world of social media, you know, tweets are like phone calls, like a quick reminder, or, you know, remember to go, or are you going to the meeting, or can I see you for lunch, that kind of thing. It's a quick, short communication. Facebook posts are like snapshots at the moment in time, and blogs are like chapters. So you're writing a little chapter in is like your ever-evolving story. So if you're writing your own personal blog, you know, it kind of builds on itself. People start to read you, and they follow you, and they yeah, as you gain followers, you're writing something different every time, but they get to understand your voice and like your voice and know your voice. If you're writing blogs, for example, for 3PGC or for another site, then you're not, you don't have the same continuing story. You're sort of part of an evolving, continuing story of a lot of people. But there's a topic. So like if you're writing for 3PGC, the assumption is you're writing about the principles in some way. If you're writing a food blog, the assumption is you're writing about food. So there's always a thematic thread that runs through a blog. And that's why people follow it, because they're interested in that theme, and they're going to see what people have to say, you know, week after week after week. And the one thing about blogging, if you blog into an ongoing blog group, such as 3PGC, you know, then you don't have to write on any particular schedule. But if you're writing your own blog on your own website or on somebody's site that you're sharing, and you're the only voice on that blog, you have to remember to blog often enough. And I'm my own worst example of this sometimes, because I get very busy and I forget to write another blog. But you have to blog often enough that your followers don't lose sight of you. You know, that they kind of look forward to your blog. And I know I haven't, every once in a while, and now is one of those periods, I get very busy and I miss 2 or 3 weeks, and I run into people and say, did I miss a blog? Did you write a blog? Where's your next blog? And I realize that, you know, people kind of get used to seeing them. They're kind of wondering what happened to me. So, so you want to have some kind of a, if you're going to commit yourself to blogging on your own, you should probably, you know, put a little reminder on your calendar, at least monthly or every other week or every week. And some people blog every day if they write short blogs, but I think that's too much myself. I'm not, I could never read that many people. I follow a lot of people, and I don't want to see them every day. So that's one thing about a blog. It's a continuous flow on a topic that people follow and they get used to following. And the good part about that, to me, is that as people build interest and build a set of followers for their blogs, you know, people then resend, they repost things that you blog. So you get to reach a pretty wide audience. And it's always surprising to me how quickly blogs do build interest groups for new ideas, and they keep people engaged for a long time in the topic that they're about. And they get people started on a topic that they might not have known they were going to be interested in, and they'll follow it for quite a while, as long as there's fresh information. So I think that blogging, for all of us that are really committed and dedicated to the 3 principles, blogging is a very simple and effective way to continually reach new people and reach way beyond our immediate circle. So I'm amazed. I use WordPress for my website, and I blog on my own website, and so I can follow statistics, you know, for my blog. And it, you know, there are people like the last time I blogged, I looked at the map of the world that shows where people are reading your blog. There's somebody in Namibia. I'm going, Namibia? I don't know anybody in Namibia, so I don't know how that happened, but isn't that wonderful? I mean, somebody in Namibia read a blog about the principles. That's pretty exciting. So, you know, it's kind of thrilling to see how far and wide your reach starts to extend as you start to build followers. And when I started my blog, when I redid my website just a few years ago, so I lost all my followers because I've moved to a new web location and I had to get people to re-sign up. So when I first started my blog, I had maybe 25 or 30 followers, and now there's something like 700. So it just, and that all is, I've made no effort whatsoever except to continue to write and hope that the people that like it will share it and pass it on to other people who then sign up and so on and so forth. So blogging is a very good way to engage people. And the best part is you're engaging people you don't necessarily know, and you may never know, but they come to hear your voice through your blog, and they're appreciative. So that's sort of to persuade you that it's a really good thing to do, because I think part of my role here is to get people who might be a little resistant or reluctant to write blogs for 3PGC or for their own site to go ahead and get started. So a basic blog is it's like if you think about getting ready to write something, it'd be like you wanted to share something with a friend. So something happened to you, or you saw something, or you did something, and you're going to tell somebody about it. That's really how simple it is. It's really, you know, the basic premise of a blog is that it's a little snapshot of an idea that's important to you. So it's not a treatise, it's not a report, it's not a term paper. It's just a moment in time where you have a fully developed idea that is important to you, so you want to share it with other people. And if you can keep it simple in your mind, just keep it simple like that you're just going to write about this one insight or this one idea or this one new thought, and you're going to keep it simple and brief. It's really not intimidating. So I've had a lot of people who say, well, I don't know, I'm not much of a writer, I don't think I can write a blog. And my question is, well, can you carry on a conversation? And Rick goes, well, of course I can carry on a conversation. Well, you know, just do your side of the conversation and write it down, you know, because that's all it is. It's your personal voice. So the thing about a blog is it's informal. You don't have to be, you know, Shakespeare to write a blog. You just have to be a nice person with a good idea who has passion behind that particular idea. And that will show through. So one subject at a time, you know, if you have several ideas, then you should write several blogs, because the one thing about a blog is people don't commit to a really lengthy reading experience. I always say, you know, you just imagine yourself, you know, you're during the commercial you read a blog, or, you know, between events, or you're on the bus, or you're, you know, waiting in the car for somebody. It's something people tend to devote a very short amount of time to. That doesn't mean they don't enjoy it when they're doing it. You want to keep it simple and brief, and you want to keep the sentences, and I'm guilty sometimes of writing complex sentences just because I can, but I try to myself. I go back to my blogs and try to break my sentences up. To keep it simple, easy to read, and especially define terms that are unknown generally and avoid jargon. And I think this is something that we all forget when we're talking to each other, is that you know, you'd be amazed at the amount of language that people in the 3 principles have used as a shorthand for something they understand completely when they're talking to other 3P practitioners or devotees. And people outside of our group have no idea what we're talking about. And, you know, like, here's some terminology that people, you know, the word principle. A lot of people have no idea. Like, principle can mean a lot of different things if you look it up in the dictionary. We know what it means to us, but when you talk about the 3 principles and don't stop to define them or point in the direction of what they mean in our context, people don't know what you're talking about. So every time you refer to the 3 principles, you need to find your voice to find a short way to say what you mean by that. And it can be as simple as, you know, what the 3 principles mean really is that we're all energetic beings who think constantly, and our thinking looks real to us. I mean, you don't have to define, you don't have to give the big formal definition, but you have to bring people with you when you use terminology. The word grounding, just don't use it. I mean, it's one of those words that really, you know, we use it among each other and people have different feelings about it. A lot of people find it a very judgmental term. And so you can talk about how well people understand, how deeply they understand, how much they see, how clear it is to them. All of that refers to grounding. How calm they feel, how centered they feel, how comfortable they are in their own skin. So there are all kinds of ordinary terms that you can use without using the buzzwords. So the most important thing is when you just talk in your real voice, is what I'm saying. You know how parents are always saying, you know, use your inside voice. Well, you want to use your ordinary voice. You know, so when you're writing a blog, you don't want to be talking, you know, in jargon. You don't want to be talking above people's heads. And you want to be using just the words you would use in conversation with a stranger on a bus. You know, just think of it that way. You're not talking down to people. You're just talking regular. So if that makes sense. It's always good when you're writing a blog to use a metaphor or a story, something to draw people in, and keep it personalized but generalizable. So sometimes I've seen the biggest mistake I see in blogs, and not just free principle blogs, but all kinds of blogs, is people will go on and on and on and on about something that's very important to them, but you lose people because it didn't happen to them. And one of the examples that I can give you for that is in all the years that I knew Sid Banks, I've heard him tell his story of, you know, the moment that he saw the principles probably 70 times. You know, and it was always less than 3 minutes long. I mean, this is one of the most momentous things that ever happened to this man, and yet he was able to compress it and keep it generalizable and make it look like it could happen to anybody because he didn't go into exhaustive personal details. It was like, this is what I saw, this is how it looked to me, this is what it meant to me, and there you go. And so it's always good to remember that you want other people to be able to imagine themselves having the same level of insight or the same kinds of moments. And not to make yourself special, but to make the experience accessible to people, if that makes sense. So I'm going to stop at this point before I go any farther and see if anyone has a question.
Just to remind you, if you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand or send the chat, and I will unmute you.
Okay. So again, to check in with you, because I don't know whether I'm telling you what you were hoping to hear about, raise your hand if this is all working for you, if I'm going in the right direction and this is helpful. Okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Okay, if you're one who did not raise your hand, which I'm assuming means that there's something that you were hoping I would talk about that I haven't talked about, would you mind just write it in the chat forum? Please get to whatever. There's something that's really on your mind that you're hoping I'll cover before this is over. Because I certainly am happy. I really want this to be helpful and useful to you. So back to the 3P. As I've said, we don't want to assume that people already know what the 3 principles are. We have to, every time you talk about them, you just want to find a fresh voice about them and keep it very real and ordinary. You know, one of the things that people, when they first get involved, they're kind of awestruck by the principles. And people are like, oh, wow, the principles, that's a really big topic. You know, that's big philosophy. That's, ooh. You know, and really, no, it's very simple. You know, innate health is common to all people, and we all see it. Anyone can see it, and you'll see it in your own voice and in your own words. And so don't be afraid to say what you see. I remember years and years ago, God, it was a long time ago, I don't remember, it was sometime in the 80s, I was speaking at a 3 Principles conference in Boston, and during the time that I was speaking, it suddenly occurred to me that the evanescence, the brevity of thought was like looking at a kaleidoscope. You know, if you even breathe, it changes. You know, you can't hold the same exact picture in a kaleidoscope. And it came to me while I was speaking. And it's so funny because I talked about it in that moment. I'd never thought of it before, and I was trying to talk about the power of thought, but how fleeting it is and how untrustworthy it is, you know, that it looks different. And then this kaleidoscope thing came to me, and I said that, you know, I just shared with everybody, look, I just had this thought, and it's fleeting, and I want to share it with you because I think it illustrates what I was trying to say. And I gave that example, and people started applauding. And I think the reason was because it was simple. It was like, oh, everybody looked in a kaleidoscope. Everybody knows that that's true. Everybody could see it right in that moment that, oh, yeah, okay, it's that simple. It's just you see something, and then it's gone, you know, and something else shows up. So, you know, don't assume people know what the principles are, but don't be afraid to say what you see. And even if it seems kind of like, no, I've never heard anybody say, none of the big wise people have ever said this. Well, that's good. That means you're speaking with your own voice, you know. Always stay with your point and keep, you know, there's an old saying in speaking and writing that says, you know, you tell people what you're going to say, you say it, and then you tell people what you said. And so, you know, you set up your block with just a kind of pointing in the direction of the topic you want to talk about, then you explain your topic, and then, you know, when you finish, you have a little sort of restatement in different words. But always remember to point back to the principles. And so often people forget, they think that everybody can see it. And if you can remember how weird the principles sounded to you when you first heard them, I know it gets harder and harder as the time goes by, you know, because we get very comfortable with it, the way we see the world. And that's what's good about working with clients and working with new people is that you realize how bizarre this sounds to people when they first hear it. Like, you've got to be kidding me. My mother-in-law is not making me angry? Are you kidding? You know, and people don't, they're like, no, it's like I see clients once a week at the Women's Resource Center just to keep myself fresh and remind myself what it's like to work with individuals and help people too, of course. And I had a girl that was my client last week. She's never talked to anybody that came from our perspective, but she's been in she was 19. She's been in psychotherapy since she was 14. So she had 5 years of experience with various counselors and 2 rehab centers. And man, you talk about jargon. I mean, she came in loaded for there. She started on what she expected. You know, she had the whole system down. So she's going to tell me all the problems, all the things that have gone wrong in her life, all the bad stuff her parents did. And I said, stop, wait a minute. I'm not interested in any of that. And she said, what? You're a counselor, aren't you? And I said, well, I'm a mental health educator. I'm not really a traditional counselor. And she said, well, everybody I've ever talked to is wanting to know all this stuff. I just thought I'd get it over with. And I said, well, I don't want to know that. What I want to know is, how is it when you're okay? And she said, well, nobody thinks I'm okay. I said, well, I didn't ask you what other people think. You know, how is it when you're okay? When you're okay? And it took her a few minutes to grasp the question. But then she was great, you know, because she started talking about, you know, that she could remember when she felt at peace, and that's what she was looking for again. But everybody was getting her so confused, and she had so many things on her mind, blah blah blah. Well, this is what you want to remember when you're writing a blog: that people don't just automatically know what we're talking about just because we do. So you're always wanting to keep a point simple and keep pointing to what it is that shows the principles at work. So, and this is I can't tell you how important this is, because that's the difference between the people who are great teachers and the people who are deeply touched but can't share very well, is whether they can really keep pointing back to the principles. You know, every time you tell a story, you wind it up with a statement about why this points back to the principles. What does this have to, how is this showing the principles at work? Because you want people to keep getting increasingly comfortable with the idea of the inside-out nature of life. So you, after you develop your point, you go back again and point to why this shows you what it means to have the principles at work. And then if you're going to use a source, and I know this is controversial, and I'm going to say it anyway, and you're just going to have to listen to it because I'm the presenter. If you're going to use a source, start with Sidney Banks. And the reason I say that is so simple. He's the one who saw it fresh, out of nothing. No one was talking about it until, I mean, not to say that the principles weren't at work in the world forever and ever and ever, and not to say that you can't find them in other literature and philosophy, but the principles as we teach them in the fields of education and psychology and all the areas that we teach were articulated in this time by Cindy Banks, who saw them with extraordinary clarity. And every time you pull a quote out of a Cindy Banks book, it's about as clear as it's going to be, you know. And I would not presume to suggest that there's anybody right now that sees it as clear as Sid saw it. Not to say they're not great people, not to say we don't all see it, not to say that everybody doesn't have it in them, not to say that Sid didn't keep insisting that all of us could be enlightened at any moment, and you really believe that, but to say that if you have a source, like any good field, if you have a primary source, use it, because it can only help people. And pointing people back to Sid's books and Sid's work helps people. I can't tell you the number. I've probably, in the course of years of all the seminars and courses and everything else I've done, I've probably given away or insisted that people purchase thousands of The Missing Link. And I've never, ever, ever found a person that didn't say, wow, that book is amazing, for whatever reason. It speaks differently to different people. So, you know, I often quote Sid when I write blogs. I'm not saying it's a must-do, but if you're going to quote people, don't get too far from the source. And I used to get very upset when people were, you know, running around quoting Eckhart Tolle and Oprah Winfrey and all these sort of gurus out there, because that isn't really what we talk about. They're not talking the principles. It may sound a lot like it, and it may sound sort of close, but it isn't. So, you know, if you can, let's stay with the primary source. And again, I know it's controversial. A lot of people think that's crazy, but I believe in it, so I'm sharing it. And so here's an example. Let's say your point is moves pass effortlessly if we understand how our minds work. And actually, that's a very profound point. I mean, people have written about this for years, but you know, I can't tell you the number of people who don't have any idea about the principles, that have no idea how to get out of a bad mood. So they're trying to fight their bad mood, and they're in it for days on end, because to try to fight something, you have to keep it around. So that isn't, you know, that may sound self-evident to you, may sound like a really stupid point, but it isn't. And that's big news to a lot of people. So let's say you got to remember that when you start thinking about the points that you could make from the standpoint of the principles. Yeah, they may sound kind of stupid and self-evident to you, but if you think about how little you knew before you saw this and how baffled you were by simple psychological events that now make perfect sense to you, you know, just keep yourself humble that way. Remember that it isn't all that straightforward to people until they start to look in this direction. So let's say you wanted to use a story or a metaphor, and I just said, here's an example. You can use something as simple as, if you notice children, as soon as they're distracted, their moods change. So, you know, if you want to get kids to stop fighting, you point out the window, and they'll look out the window and forget what they were talking about. So it's very simple to distract children. Well, it's really simple to distract anybody, because children's minds are just like our minds. They just have less on them. But so, you know, you can use a story like that, or a story from your own life of how you thought you were, you know, you were struggling to try to figure something out, and then you got in a situation where you had to help somebody that was struggling, was carrying something across the street or something, and by the time you got across the street, you felt better, you know, because you cleared your head. So things like that. A simple, light illustration is very helpful when you're writing a blog. And then bring it back to the 3 principles, you know, how baffling it is when these things happen if you don't understand how things work, what's going on behind it. So that's very simple. You could just right now in your own mind reflect on something that was important to you, some point that occurred to you at some point during your learning that was meaningful, like moods pass, or I get over things eventually, or people are more innocent than I thought they were, or everybody's caught up in their own thinking and it's not about me. There are all these really simple things that all of us have started to see over time that are very confusing to people that don't see the inside-out action of the principles. So you don't have to blog on great topics, you know, big, huge philosophical things. Just little helpful life illustrations are wonderful. And I've noticed a lot of people have started on Facebook writing just little messages that are very sweet, you know, something that they observed in their daily life. It's really helpful to people. So don't be afraid of, don't ever think your point's too simple. It probably means it's a good one. Now, I've already talked about this a little bit, about don't go into too much detail because you really want people to have their own insights. So, you know, a blog is not a chance for you to tell your deepest secrets and go into a lot of detail. And, oh gosh, I mean, it's like if you've ever read a lot of literature from recovering alcoholics, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about people in the principles, but I'm talking about in that field. You know, honestly, people get so excited when they start feeling like they're in recovery that they just go on and on and on about their dreams and their nightmares and their, you know, interactions with people and how they have to, you know, get past a bar and go through all the smells and tastes and sounds and blah, blah, blah. And you think, oh, my goodness, you know, too much information. So remember, our point when we blog about the principles is to inspire insight in other people. So the more detailed you go into about your personal life, the farther away you get from the generalizability of the point. That makes sense. So you just want to provide the essence of your insight in a little illustration, you know, simple. Keep it action and little description, because the power is in the feeling and not in the words. And your sense of being inspired or touched or you know, just awakened to something will come across if you keep it fresh and simple. And that's where people struggle most, I think, is, you know, when do I stop talking? And my answer is, you know, write as much as you want and then cut a lot of it. You know? So you'd be surprised when I write blogs, you know, people all say, oh, it's so easy for you, but it really isn't. I mean, I'll write a blog and I'm pretty self-disciplined as a writer because I was in the newspaper business for years and we wrote to a word length and a deadline. So you didn't have any spare time to be cutting. You had to just get everything in your word length. And that was an arbitrary assignment. So an editor would say, fine, your world is coming to an end and we've got a hole on page 1. You've got 600 words and that's it. So it's too bad the world is coming to an end, but you got to figure out a way to get it to 600 words. So I have a lot of self-discipline, and even with that and all that experience, when I sit down to write a blog, I almost always, what I end up spending is about half as long as what I first wrote. If I look at it and I go, does this really need to be here? Is this more than people really want to know? Do I need this extra detail? Have I just veered off course? So being self-critical is not a bad thing if there's as long as you don't beat yourself up. But just to ask yourself those questions, you know, is this more than I need to get my point across? So let me stop again and see if there are questions, because I don't want the time to get away from me and people didn't get to ask their questions. Anyone have a question?
You know what to do if you have a question. Don't be shy. You can ask questions.
Raise your hand. Is Jen Lucas's hand up? Is that a hand I see?
I can unmute her to ask him.
Yeah. Well, I see a hand. I see Jen Lucas and a hand.
Jen, do you
Hi.
have a question?
I didn't have a question. I had it raised from last time,
Oh,
but as long as you have me unmuted, I did just want to say that this is really, really helpful.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I wanted to say in particular that I knew about the idea of not going on too much or having too much detail and keeping it simple, but to see that the reason for that is that we want to point people to their own insights and not take people too far out of the field of that.
Yeah.
It's just really helpful, and it helps me see how to know what to edit out of my first sort of brain explosion into the paper that's too much, and then when I go back and edit and I'm wondering what do I take out, that just really makes it so much simpler to see what's useful to take out. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so happy to hear that. What everybody wants to hear is that somebody got something from what you're teaching. So the other thing is, when you were talking about keeping it simple, one of the things, and I am really bad at this, is like I will use an adjective, and then I'm actually I'm a big fan of William Faulkner, who is one of the most complex writers on the face of the planet. And I wrote my master's thesis on the poetry of Wallace Stevens, who is probably one of the most complex poetry writers on the planet. And, and I was a student of linguistics, grammar, the study of the science of language. So constructing complicated sentences is really fun for me. And diagramming them is tons of fun, although you have no reason to do that anymore. But anyway, so that's how weird and nerdy I am. So I have a real tendency to overdo phrases, clauses, adjectives, adverbs, because if one's good, maybe 6 would be even better. And I sometimes look at my writing and I go, oh my God, who do you think you are? Pick one. Look at your adjectives and pick the one that really works and get rid of the extraneous ones. Pick your adverb, and if you have 4 other adverbial modifiers, you don't need that many. Because you want to pick the strongest language that you have that comes to mind for you. And you can tell when you look at it. Like it's much stronger to talk about the purple night than it is to say it was dark outside. Because the purple night conveys a feeling. Purple is a special kind of dark, and it's, so, as you write things down, you can tell what's good from what's not so good, if you're honest about it. And just don't hesitate to slash and burn, Okay, get it down to the really good stuff. Okay. So, and the other thing is, and this is everybody's big thing. So, you go to a conference and you hear, or you listen to a tape of Sid, let's say, not rather pick out any of us, but you listen to a tape from Sid and you think, oh man, that's very lofty, man, that's very inspiring. And you think, I loved it when he said X is, whatever, X, Y, Z. So you write that down and you go, I'm going to talk about that. But see, you don't see it. You're just excited about the fact that you saw Sid see it. And so remember to write from your truth. And I have to tell you that is powerful when you do it, because whatever's true for you will come through you in a really strong way for other people. It'll really resonate with them. You know how you can really tell? I know this, I shouldn't say this on a videotape, but Bill Pettit, I'm going to blame him. Bill Pettit is always talking about how people have a built-in bullshit meter. Well, they do, so you can tell it with yourself too, when you're really talking big time over your head or way out of your league, and you can tell. So when people are talking about something that they don't really see for themselves, you can tell. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to write anything beyond your own understanding or above your head, but write only what you've seen for yourself and that you're really clear about. And I remember the very first time I actually did, my first introduction to the principles was years ago with Bill Pettit, who was he was one of my clients. He was a psychiatrist, and I was in the medical practice management business. And so I was very excited about what I was learning, and you know, I was kind of wanting to share, and I was going to do a volunteer talk for a women's group, and I was like, you know, running through topics, you know, trying to impress Bill with, you know, all the things I thought to talk about. And he said, you know, it sounds like a lot of crap to me. He said, why don't you just talk about the one thing you really understand? I was like, for all this time, I only understand one thing. He said, well, there's got to be one thing that really meant a lot to you that you saw that was pivotal for you, that you really, really see it, and you really understand it. And I reflected on that, and I realized the one thing I saw is that I was making up self-judgmental things every day as if other people were telling them to me. I had no idea that I was creating this judgmental world that I lived in on my own. I just didn't know that. So, and I remembered he used the example in a talk he gave one time about how people, it's like they get up in the morning and they write a bunch of nasty notes about themselves and hide them around the house. And then when they get home at the end of the day, they find them and they think people have been leaving them for them. You know, and that's kind of how I live my life. It's like nothing was ever good enough for me. It's not like other people didn't think I was doing fine. It was me. And now that's something I really saw, how freeing it was to not have to do that anymore. That was just hugely freeing, and it was kind of the first thing that really kind of set me in a direction of having peace of mind. So I talked about that. And there were people crying. They're sitting in the audience crying. You know, now I was stunned at the response from the audience, but some woman came up to me at the end and she gave me a big hug and she said, this has changed my whole life. She said, you just can't imagine. I could feel how clear it was to you. I felt like I'll be able to see this. I can keep looking in that direction. So that's what's possible for all of us. The only reason I'm using myself as an example is because I remember it, you know. But I've been in other situations with many people that have that effect on people, and the reason that we can have that effect is because we're speaking from the heart about something that's crystal clear to us. So, you know, you don't want to just take a topic. It's not like school where, you know, you have to do a book report on Little Women whether you wanted to or not. You know, you don't have to write about anything you don't want to write about. And you don't have to write about what you think your teachers or other people would want you to write about, because it doesn't matter. We don't care. You know, you write about what speaks to your heart. And when you do that, and you come from your own heart in your own words, you can move mountains with very simple little stories. It doesn't take much. So, but that is critical. And I think a lot of people feel like, you know, one of the things you get over when you get deeply involved in the principles is any interest in impressing people, because we don't get impressed. You know, it's like, I'm sorry, it's just not that impressive. We're all the same. When you really see that we're all the same, we are all the same. You know, so there are no star-built niches, if any of you are familiar with Dr. Seuss. You know, there's just niches. And then some of the teachers take stars on their village, but that doesn't make them any different. It's just in their own mind. So you got to remember that speaking your truth is the thing that sets you apart from most people in the world who don't know their truth. And that's what you want people to start to see. And you want them to find their truth. And when they hear you talk your truth, they get closer to looking in that direction. So that's the power of blogging in this world. But also you want to keep it light, and that's sort of my parting information for people is remember that we're all about joy and love and happiness and freedom and contentment and beauty and all the peace of mind and all the good stuff. So if you find yourself getting way too serious, you're probably way too serious. You shouldn't be writing at that moment. You know, just drop it and, you know, get a cup of coffee or something. Because seriousness is the enemy of truth. It really is. And it's what's wrong in the world today. You know, I was I'm the president of a civic organization in the town that I live in, and we have monthly meetings in which, and as the president, I moderate the meetings. And we had these two politicians at the last meeting. We're in this big, serious discussion about a half-penny tax. We're like, who the hell cares? Nobody notices a half cent. But anyway, but they're getting really wound up about it, and they're all in this big argument about it. And this woman who's now 86 years old, who used to be a county commissioner, comes to the microphone where we have people in the audience can ask questions. She comes up to the microphone and she tells this hilarious story about the time years ago when she was on the county commission and they passed this tax. And I won't go into the story, it's not meaningful, but it was really funny. And people were so relieved, because they were sick and tired of listening to two guys who were so serious. And then she came and told a story that made the same point, but made it with humor and lightheartedness and a sense of, hey, okay, it always works out. And it just broke the tension. And so to some extent when we write, although sometimes we write about deeply touching things and they are serious, mental health is seriously important, we don't have to be serious about it for it to be seriously meaningful. So try to stay, lighthearted and stay kind of in the good feelings when you write. And if you're not sure, sleep on it, because it's amazing what it, it was such a big gift to me when I was on the newspaper for years, and I was a day reporter. I was, covered things for years, and then I got assigned to be an investigative reporter. Investigative reporters had a lot of freedom because I could spend months on a story if I wanted to, doing research and writing installments. And it was an amazing experience for me to be able to write something and not have to turn it in. I could wait a day and look at it again and fix it and make it better. And I turned into a much better writer very quickly because I had time to reflect. So you do have that luxury. If you're a blogger, you're writing that on schedule. And you can always reflect. And so if you're not sure, just give it a rest and take a look at it tomorrow and or show it to somebody, show it to a friend and say, what do you think? Don't show it to a sucky friend. Show it to a friend who's truthful, and listen. So that's kind of like the important things that I wanted to say, and I just said a few more things about, I've already talked about Sedgeman, so I don't want to beat you over the head with that, but, I'm just a big fan of us not losing sight of the contribution that Sid made to human understanding and sharing it with people that will never know him and never see him and may never watch a tape or get the feeling for it. So with that said, I'm open for questions.
One question from Shirley, so I'm going to open the mic for Shirley to ask.
Okay.
Shirley, it's all yours. Shirley, do you have a question?
I send it in.
Shirley, we can hear you okay if you want to talk.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't expect to get in. I wrote up the question and can you go a little bit deeper in what's helpful to help others to gain insight?
Sure.
Because that's still not clear for me, like what's helpful to evoke, or I didn't even know what to ask for to help others get into insight.
I understand your question. Yeah, okay. I mean, it's the question that we all have. And so let me say it again, that the power of that is in the feeling, and it's helpful. Two things are helpful when you're writing to remember to point to point to the fact that all human beings have the same thing going on. That if I see something and I have an insight, it doesn't make me special. It just means that I'm tapping into something that every human being on the planet has. So continually reassuring people over time as you blog, you know, remembering to point back to the fact that, you know, it's like Sid used to say, if this could happen to me, it could happen to anybody, you know, orphan welder, you know. So that's one thing, is to continually remember and point to the idea that all people have the same capacity. You know, that insight is a normal, routine, ordinary part of our daily life. But noticing insight is something we have to kind of get used to and appreciating it and giving it space to blossom. So that's one thing, is that's what I meant by generalizability, that our experiences, we don't want to keep making it as unique as though we're special, but we want to be talking about how we're just having a human experience that's available to everybody. And the more you see, the more you see. But the other thing is, when you're speaking from your heart, you're much more likely to touch people than when you're speaking from your head. You don't want to be writing sort of academic papers. You want to be writing from the heart of the blog. You want to be writing in your own voice, conversationally, so that people feel like they're just talking to a friend, and that you're bringing out the best in them because you're pointing to it. I hope that's helpful, but, you know, it's just something that comes in time. It's not like a technique, or it's not it's not like there's anything special except to have it in your own heart and in your own mind that that the people, that your audience is no different from you. They may not have had your same experience, and they may not yet be seeing how clear things look when you can see life from the standpoint of the principles, but they're still have the same capacity, and just count on that. So I hope that's a helpful answer, but that I do understand your question, and I don't want to try to tell you a thing to do, because it's not about a thing to do. It's about just being comfortable and clear and speaking from the heart and touching the hearts of others. Any other questions?
Thank you, Judy. Anybody else for questions?
You guys are easy. I'm used to my graduate students. They got a really impressive. Oh, here's some questions.
It is. Okay. I'm going to unmute Geraldine first.
Okay.
So Geraldine, go ahead.
Hi.
We can't hear you very well, Geraldine.
We're getting rumbling.
Yeah. We could hear you, but we can't now.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, that's good.
Did you hear something?
Yeah.
Can you
ask
hear me?
your question. Ask your question. Yeah.
What? Wow, I didn't realize this. I'm sitting here looking at Judy and listening and typing in. Okay, Judy, I'm just wondering. I typed this in. You know, I live in Ireland, and I'm thinking the cost for attending a seminar or to seek the expertise of practitioners seems very high, especially for if you don't have an income. Okay, and you know, is this just me creating my moment by moment experience, or is there merit to it? Do you think? I don't really understand. Is it me? You know, my private creation of moment by moment experience of life, or how do I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, it's always us. You know, I mean, the truth is, if you're having an experience, you're creating it. So,
yeah.
You know, there really isn't any. It is, yes. The answer to the question is it's you, but it's also we have to deal with practical life. So, you know, I would say whenever I'm in a situation where it starts to look hard for me, or it starts to look like I'm not sure what to do next, which happens often, you know, because I have to work on my own a lot. I find that if I just relax and give it as little intellectual attention as I can.
Yeah.
Two things happen. One is I'm more likely to notice opportunity that I didn't see there. That's number one. And number two, I get ideas that I never had before, which make things look easier. So, you know, it's us, and the other answer is we're always one moment away from an insight that will take us to a whole new place. So, you know, we'll never get stuck in play. And how we get stuck is just rethinking the same thoughts if they're not working out for us. But I had a woman who came to my group that I do just a week or so ago, and she was trying to tell the other women in the group what had happened to her, and people found it unbelievable. But she had come to group one day and said she had tried to commit suicide, but her daughter had interrupted her, and she didn't get to do that. And she was about as low as she's ever been in her life and everything. And so I talked to her. I asked permission of the group, and I said, can I just work with her, and you guys get what you can from it? Because, I mean, I didn't want to let her go when she was in that state. So a week and a half later, she comes back, 2 weeks later, she comes back to group, and she says, this is what happened to me. I listened to Judy, and I thought, I can change. This is just temporary. I don't need to feel this bad. I'm keeping myself there because I keep getting so scared of feeling so bad. She just started having all these insights. So her biggest problem was she was afraid she was going to be homeless because she was living with her daughter and her husband had gotten transferred and they were moving to another city, and she couldn't move with them, and she didn't have a job. And so she thought she was going to have to go to a homeless shelter. So after she had these insights, she had like a day of, you know, uplifting insights. She starts looking in the want ads and she sees this job that she's really qualified for. So she applies for it and gets it. And it's at Macy's department store. So not only does she have a job that she likes, but she has a discount on anything she needs to buy at a department store. She's driving back from getting her job in a friend's car. She's got to return a friend's car that night. And she drives by this person's house and there's a car in the front lawn that says for sale by owner. And it's exactly the kind of car she's been hoping to get because it's got lots of trunk space. And she stops and the owner says, well, I'm moving. I've got to sell this car. It's been on my front lawn for a month now. Nobody's bought it. It's in really good shape. And she says, well, I have a friend who's a mechanic, and I had my friend look at it. He says, sure, take it. She takes it to the mechanic. The mechanic says it's fine. She buys it. And the guy sells it to her really cheap because he's got to move and he's got to get rid of it. So she goes back. She goes to the grocery store because now she's got a car and a job. The next day she goes to the grocery store, and there's a person posting a notice looking for a roommate. And this is a woman who has a nice house. She's a nurse, and her son has just gone to college. And she decides to try to advertise for a roommate because she could use a little bit of extra money in the companionship. So they struck up a conversation, and she goes back and looks at this woman's house, which is really cute. And next thing you know, she's got a place to live. So within 3 days, these huge life problems solved. And the only reason they solved because their head was clear and she could see what was right in front of her. And she herself couldn't believe it. But she would have, if she'd been depressed and distracted and discouraged, she would have written off. She would have driven by that car in front of the guy's house and thought, oh, I can't afford a car. She wouldn't have gone to apply for the job because she'd be so depressed she didn't want to talk to anybody. She wouldn't have ever struck up a conversation instead of looking for a roommate if she was in a really low mood or really discouraged. So, yeah, we do create it, and just remember it. It's going to change every minute. So, any other questions?
I've noticed that sometimes what's free on the internet is really, really good, and I found that to be true for me too.
Yeah.
Just YouTube. So, thanks.
You're welcome. I guess I've used up all my time, and I hope this has been helpful to you, and I've really, really enjoyed it. And feel free to email me, or I guess you all probably know how to reach me. You can find me through the 3PGC website, or someone can tell you. But if you have any questions, or if there's anything I can ever do for you, don't hesitate to ask. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Judy, for such an inspiring webinar at so many levels beyond blogging.
Yeah.
So I hope it will give all of you, including me, inspiration and to start blogging and send blog material to the free PGC, which will be very grateful to receive.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Judy, for that.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.